Hello everyone, my name is Mirko and welcome back to the channel, welcome back to another brand new Apex Legends video. And in today's video I'm going to be giving you guys the ultimate guide on how to use Mirage to its best potential, and we're going to speak about the huge advantages and disadvantages that this legend has. Now if you guys go ahead and enjoy today's video, be sure to drop a big thumbs up down below to help the video reach out to more people, and if you're currently not subscribed to the channel, be sure you're subscribing so you don't miss out on any future Apex Legends videos on the channel. So anyway, let's speak about the huge advantages that this legend has. So the first huge advantage that comes with using this legend is that its abilities gives you a huge chance to bait enemies and draw enemies in, and this is one of the best, if not the best legend to be using if you want to purely expose enemies. Now another huge advantage that comes with using Mirage is his ultimate ability. Now his ultimate ability actually gives you a lot of flexibility and gives you a lot of choice when it comes to things like rotating, especially in solos where the last ring will usually be smaller than if you were playing in a team-based game mode, purely because every person is for themselves, so the rings will usually be smaller than in another game mode. And his ultimate ability makes rotating not only more safer but much more easier as well, and you can get in great positions. And lastly is that his tactical ability charges up much more faster than some other abilities. In around 14 seconds you can deploy another decoy, so you don't have to be afraid of when you should use the tactical ability, and in fact you should use it as much as possible. So as with the disadvantages that this legend has, of course every legend in this game will have some disadvantages. The first one being he has a slightly larger hitbox than some of the other legends. He doesn't have the largest hitbox, but in the rare occasion that can actually be a deciding factor. And the other disadvantage is that he's not a very good defensive legend when it comes to snapping out of a gunfight or going into retreat mode, as when you're using his tactical ability, of course you are still exposed, and although you're not as exposed when using his ultimate ability, unfortunately his ultimate does take a long time to charge up. Although he has these disadvantages, I would say his advantages completely outshine his disadvantages, and he's probably in the top 3 best legends to be using, particularly in solos. The reason why Mirage is particularly good in solos is because he is generally a solo legend. He doesn't offer much variety for your team, and when using Mirage's tactical ability you want to make sure you're creating the best angles possible to cause maximum distraction to the enemies. His tactical ability is also very useful if you're unsure if an enemy is in a particular building. You can use his tactical ability to be more reassured that there's no one in the building and it's fairly safe to go into. Now when I talk about angles and using the best angles possible, if we take a look at this example here, the time when Mirage's tactical ability is at its most strongest is when you and the enemy have not seen eye to eye and you're both unaware of where you're located, and that's when you can deploy his tactical ability. Bearing in mind it goes straight forward to the time you deployed it, that's when the enemy has the first contact with your decoy, and once the enemy starts shooting at your decoy you can almost come in as a third party and pick off some easy shots. Now just a quick warning that if you're in a building or if you're very close to each other, if you do deploy his decoy, some enemies might be able to actually hear the deploy animation. As you can see from this example here, the enemy did not get fooled, but this is also another good example on what I'm going to be talking about, and that's being less predictable. Now notice how I said earlier the best time to be using his decoy is when you and the enemy have not actually seen each other. Well, in this example me and the enemy had previously been going in a gunfight with each other, and the enemy is a good enough player to understand that I wouldn't be running out there in the open. That's why he didn't get fooled by my decoy. However, if the decoy was the first point of contact between me and the enemy would have probably started shooting at it because it would have been less predictable, as in most situations people like to pull out their decoy in gunfights. There is no harm in pulling out your decoy during a gunfight because, as I said earlier on in the video, the charge up time for your tactical is only 14 seconds, but don't rely on his decoy. Do not rely on the enemy to start shooting at the decoy, and do not wait for the enemy to start shooting at it, because I would say about 5 or 6 times out of 10 enemies will understand that that's not actually a real player. And the last thing I want to speak about when we talk about being less predictable with a decoy is don't run it straight towards the player, because as I said that's very predictable. But if you are going in a gunfight with an enemy, run it towards the next closest point of cover, towards the side of the enemy. That way the enemy is actually going to be thinking that could be a player trying to push closer towards me, and that is the best way to catch enemies off guard. And the last important tip I want to speak to you guys about when it comes to his tactical ability is that Mirage's decoy can set off caustic gas, and when it does set off caustic gas, you can actually see a ping on your screen of where the enemy is located. Just like any other time the enemy is shooting at the decoy or has dealt damage into the decoy, it will display an image on screen giving you a good idea where the enemy is located. So moving on to Mirage's ultimate ability. Now in the past few weeks he's received a huge buff where you can actually decloak yourself, and whilst his ult is active and the cloak is active, you're pretty much invisible to anyone else in sight. Mirage's ultimate ability has a huge charge up time, so you don't want to be wasting it in stupid situations. If you're playing solos in particular, you don't want to be using it to fool enemies because, as I said, it deploys multiple decoys and enemies know that there's no teams in that solo mode. You don't want to be using it in regards to trying to fool enemies because that's not going to work too well. The first way to make his ultimate ability very advantageous is when you're rotating. Now as I said earlier, you're pretty much invisible other than the fact that they can still slightly hear your footsteps when you're cloaked. But when you are rotating, especially towards the late rotation stage where players have already rotated into the ring and you're one of the last players that needs to rotate, you can pop his ultimate ability and almost guarantee safe rotation, especially in solos, as I said earlier, when the ring can get almost very small to the point where there is a radius of about 20 to 30 meters. Using his ultimate ability there is extremely advantageous. The next way you can take full advantage of his ult is when you're being third party. I mean, when you've got multiple enemies shooting at you, you can use this as a defensive style of play and you can retreat from the situation that you're in, you can reposition and have a better opportunity. Think of his ultimate ability as a way of repositioning and disengaging from gunfights. Now I know some people in the comment section are going to be saying, why did you not speak about his passive? And the reason why I haven't spoken about his passive too much is because there's not much to say. His passive is very weak in general compared to other passive abilities legends have, and the best advice I can give is when you do go down and you're cloaked, just try and get into a safe area before you become visible to the enemy. So I hope you guys have learned quite a few new tips when using Mirage, and let me know down below in the comment section, do you think you're going to be using Mirage as your main? Let me know down below in the comment section. And if there's one thing we've all learned from watching this video, is that Mirage is not to be used for an aggressive play style. If you're playing very aggressive, you're going to struggle in them situations where you need to retreat and you need to snap out of the gunfights, and in that situation Mirage is not your choice of legend. Anyway guys, I'm going to wrap this video up here. As always, my name has been Mirko and I'll catch all of you guys out in another brand new Apex Legends video.